I never imagined that a moment of triumph could turn into the worst betrayal of my life. But there I was, standing in the office bathroom, my back pressed against the cold tiles, straining to hear the muffled voices seeping through the ventilation system. It had been a good day, no, a great day. I had just secured the biggest client our firm had ever landed, a deal worth millions, the kind that would cement my place in the company as a powerhouse. I should have been basking in the victory, preparing for celebration drinks and proud smiles from my husband, Ethan. Instead, I was standing there, my stomach twisting, listening as my mother-in-law, Margaret Kensington, and my sister-in-law, Olivia, conspired to erase me from everything I had built. She was never Kensington material. Margaret's voice carried that same aristocratic sharpness that had always made me feel like an imposter in their world. Ethan made a mistake marrying her, but at least we can fix the business side of things. I felt my breath hitch. We should move quickly, Olivia responded, her voice eager. I can take over her accounts within a month. My MBA. Yes, dear. Margaret cut her off. We all know about your Master of Business Administration. There was a pause, then a rustling of papers. The board meeting next week is our opportunity. I've spoken to several members, and they're open to restructuring the sales department. With your qualifications and, more importantly, the family name, it should be a smooth transition. My hands started shaking. 6 years. 6 years of late nights, of proving my worth, of earning my way into this company despite their constant backhanded comments and undermining. 6 years of clawing for respect in a family that had never truly accepted me. And now, they were going to erase me in a single board meeting, hand my clients to Olivia, and push me out like I was nothing more than an inconvenient placeholder. What about Ethan? Olivia asked. He's always been protective of her. I held my breath. Margaret let out a soft chuckle, the kind that always carried an unspoken warning. Leave your brother to me. He needs to understand that some sacrifices are necessary for the family's legacy. The familiar click of her designer heels signaled their departure. But I stayed frozen in place, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Every awkward family dinner. Every time Margaret had introduced me as Ethan's wife, instead of by my position in the company. Every time Olivia had made a snide remark about how I'd married up. It all made sense now. They had never seen me as one of them. And they never would. I forced myself to move, stepping out of the bathroom on unsteady legs. Catching my reflection in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. My usually composed makeup couldn't hide how pale I'd gone, and a few strands of dark hair had slipped from my professional updo. I looked exactly how Margaret had always seen me, an outsider trying too hard to belong. As I walked back to my office, I barely registered my assistant, Daniel, calling my name until he placed a firm hand on my arm. Lena, are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. I forced a smile, though my face felt numb. Just thinking about the Lancaster deal. Daniel frowned. You mean the one you just closed? The one that's boosting our quarterly numbers by 30%? Yeah, must be really stressful. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. Dinner tonight. Mom wants to discuss something important. Asterisk, asterisk. My stomach lurched. Of course she did. I typed back. Can't. Working late on Lancaster contract details. Asterisk, asterisk. His response was immediate. Come on, Lena. You know how she gets. Please, asterisk, asterisk. 6 years ago, I had fallen in love with Ethan's warm smile and kind heart. I had believed that his family's cold shoulder was just temporary, that they'd warm up once they saw how dedicated I was, to both him and the company. Now, I realized how naive I had been. I looked at the framed photos on my desk. Family gatherings where I stood slightly apart. Corporate events where Margaret had ensured Olivia was front and center. The signs had always been there, I had just been too blind to see them. Sorry, I texted back. Really can't make it. Then, I turned to Daniel, my pulse finally steadying. Actually, I need your help with something. He raised an eyebrow. What's up? I squared my shoulders, finally feeling the first flicker of defiance rise through the shock. What do you know about board meeting procedures? His expression shifted, intrigued. Why? Because if they wanted a fight, they were going to get one. I wasn't going down without a war. When I walked into my office the next morning, I expected hostility, tension, maybe even an awkward conversation with Nolan. What I wasn't prepared for was Olivia sitting at my desk, flipping through my client files like she owned the place. She looked up with that practiced, insincere smile I'd seen her perfect over years of forced family dinners. "Oh, Lena," she said sweetly, setting one of my reports aside. "I hope you don't mind. Mother thought it would be a good idea for me to shadow you for a while, get a feel for how the sales department runs." I set my coffee down a little harder than necessary, watching the liquid slosh against the edges. "Funny. No one mentioned that to me." "It was just decided this morning," she said breezily, as if that explained anything. "Actually, I've already scheduled meetings with the Lancaster group for later today. I thought I'd take point on their account, give you a break." A break? My stomach twisted. The Lancaster deal was my biggest win, worth millions to the company. I had spent months building that relationship, negotiating terms, ensuring that every detail was airtight. It was mine. "That won't be necessary," I said, keeping my voice even. "Mr. Lancaster specifically requested to work with me." Olivia just shrugged. "Well, things change. Mother thinks it's important to have a Kensington handling our premium clients." Before I could respond, Ethan appeared in the doorway, looking between us with a broad smile. "They're my two favorite ladies. Getting along already?" I stiffened, but Olivia beamed up at him like a child seeking approval. "We were just going over the Lancaster account," she said sweetly. Teamwork," Ethan said, completely missing the tension between us. He walked over, kissing Olivia's cheek first before turning to me. The small gesture made my stomach drop. "Lena, honey," he said, lowering his voice, "Mom asked if we could talk later." "Actually," I cut in, voice tight, "we need to talk now." His brow furrowed. "Now?" "In private." Ethan hesitated but finally nodded. I led him down the hallway, past the rows of pristine glass offices, and into the one place I knew we wouldn't be interrupted. The same office bathroom where I had overheard his mother plotting against me. I shut the door behind us, gripping the sink to steady myself before turning to face him. "Ethan," I said carefully, "I know what your mother and Olivia are planning." His expression shifted, confusion clouding his eyes. "What are you talking about?" "I overheard them yesterday. They're trying to push me out of the company, restructure the sales department, and hand my accounts to Olivia. Your mother already spoke to the board about it." Ethan let out a slow breath, rubbing the back of his neck, a nervous habit I recognized. "Lena, come on. You must have misunderstood." I stared at him, my pulse hammering. "I didn't misunderstand. I heard them, Ethan. Word for word." He shook his head, his face settling into that careful, measured expression he always wore during difficult conversations. "Look, Mom has strong opinions about how the company should be run. But that doesn't mean she's trying to." "Don't do that," I snapped, my voice cracking. "Don't act like I'm imagining this. I've spent 6 years proving myself, building this company with you, and they're trying to erase me like I never existed." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "What do you want me to do, Lena? Tell my mother and sister they can't be involved in the family business?" I reached for his hand, but he stepped back. "I want you to stand up for me. For us." "It's not that simple," he said, his voice low. "It's complicated." I let out a bitter laugh, my anger overtaking the hurt. "No, it's not. It's actually pretty simple. Your mother is trying to take everything I've worked for, and you're letting her." A knock at the door made us both jump. "Lena," Daniel's voice came through, hesitant. "Mr. Lancaster is on line 1. He's not happy about something." I exhaled sharply. Of course he wasn't. Olivia must have already tried to insert herself where she didn't belong. Ethan seized the interruption like a lifeline. "We'll talk about this later, okay? Just try to work with Olivia. For me." I watched him walk away, my hands clenched into fists. This was it. The moment of clarity. I had spent years believing that Ethan would always have my back, that if I just worked hard enough, proved myself enough, his family would accept me. I was wrong. If I wanted to keep my place in this company, in this life I had built, I would have to fight for it. Alone. I didn't waste time feeling sorry for myself. If I wanted to survive this, I needed to understand exactly what I was up against. And that started with knowing the rules of the game. Jasper, the operations manager, was already waiting in my office when I got back from my confrontation with Ethan. He leaned against my desk, arms crossed, watching me carefully. "You finally gonna tell me what's going on?" he asked. I shut the door behind me and exhaled. I need to learn everything about board meeting procedures. Fast. Jasper's eyebrows shot up. "That bad, huh?" "Worse." I dropped into my chair. "Veronica and Olivia are trying to push me out. They're planning to restructure the sales department, and I'm not part of the plan." Jasper let out a low whistle. "Damn. I need to know what leverage I have," I said. "What it takes to overturn a board decision, who holds the real power, and what I can do to stop this before they make it official." Jasper nodded, already pulling up files on his laptop. "All right. Let's start with voting shares and bylaws." For the next hour, we combed through company policies, analyzing every loophole and technicality that might give me a fighting chance. But while I was preparing for war, Olivia was already making her first critical mistake. By noon, complaints about the Lancaster account were piling up. Emails from the client, requests for clarifications on promises Olivia had apparently made, promises that weren't in the contract. At 2 p.m., my phone buzzed with a name I had been dreading. "Mr. Lancaster." I took a deep breath before answering. "Mr. Lancaster, good to hear from you." His voice was sharp. "Lena, what the hell is going on over there?" I closed my eyes briefly. "Here we go. I understand there have been some issues." "Issues," he scoffed. "Your new associate sales director just tried to renegotiate our terms without consulting us. She promised deliverables that aren't even in the original agreement." I clenched my jaw. Olivia had been in control for less than a day, and she was already sinking the company's biggest deal. "I can assure you I'll personally handle any confusion," I said smoothly. "You'd better," he warned. "Because if this mess isn't fixed by next week, we're walking." The call ended. I sat there, gripping my phone so hard my knuckles turned white. Across the office, Olivia stood by the conference room, chatting with Veronica like nothing was wrong. Like she hadn't just jeopardized the most valuable account we had. I turned back to my laptop and began compiling every email, every client complaint, every mistake Olivia had made since stepping into my role. If they wanted to make this a power struggle, I'd make sure the board saw exactly how unqualified she was to take my place. Then, my inbox pinged with a new email. Subject, Team Announcement, Associate Sales Director. I clicked it, my stomach twisting before I even read the first line. Asterisk, please join me in welcoming Olivia Kensington as our new Associate Sales Director. Her expertise will be invaluable as we move forward with restructuring the department. Asterisk. I swallowed the bitter taste in my mouth. They weren't even pretending to hide their power grab anymore. Before I could process the full weight of the email, Jasper appeared in my doorway, his face tense. "You're not gonna like this," he said. I exhaled sharply. "Go on." "There's an emergency board meeting. Right now." I frowned. I wasn't notified. Jasper gave me a look that said he already knew the answer. "Yeah, that's the point." I stood, grabbing my laptop. They thought they could cut me out of my own company? They were about to learn just how wrong they were. I didn't knock. I didn't ask permission. I walked straight into the boardroom, my heels clicking against the polished floor, my pulse hammering like a war drum. All eyes turned to me, Veronica at the head of the table, Olivia seated beside her, looking smug. Ethan sat a few seats down, his expression unreadable, while the rest of the board members looked somewhere between annoyed and curious. "Lena," Veronica said smoothly, not even a hint of surprise in her voice. "This is a closed meeting." "Not anymore," I said, dropping a thick folder of documents onto the table with a satisfying thud. "I think you'll all want to see this." I turned to Ethan, holding out a printed email. "Go ahead. Read it." He hesitated, glancing at his mother. "Ethan." My voice was firm. "Read it." Slowly, he took the paper, his eyes scanning the words. I saw the moment it hit him, the slight tightening of his jaw, the way his fingers gripped the edges of the page a little too hard. His voice was quieter than I expected when he finally spoke. Mr. Langston is threatening to pull his business, he read aloud. Effective immediately if Olivia isn't removed from his account. A murmur spread across the table. One of the board members, an older man with silver hair, frowned. Is this true? I nodded. In the 3 weeks since Olivia inserted herself into the sales department, she's mismanaged the Lancaster accounts so badly that we're on the verge of losing them completely. That's absurd. Veronica cut in, her voice sharp. Olivia has been implementing a more efficient structure. I let out a humorless laugh. Oh, is that what we're calling unauthorized contract changes and empty promises now? Olivia's face burned red. You were just trying to play the role of a leader, I interrupted. But leadership requires competence, and you don't have it. The tension in the room thickened. Veronica leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. I think you've made your point, Lena. We'll handle the situation internally. Oh, I'm sure you'd love that, I said, pulling out another document and sliding it across the table. But I found something interesting while I was reviewing company policies. I pointed to a highlighted section in the paperwork. According to this, as part of the restructuring you've been planning, my position is being recommended for termination due to redundancy. The room fell into silence. Ethan's head snapped up. What? I met his gaze, my anger simmering beneath the surface. Did you know about this? His silence was all the answer I needed. One of the board members cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably in his seat. Veronica, is this true? She didn't even blink. I advised the board that, given the upcoming structural changes, Lena's role might no longer be necessary. It's simply business. Business. I repeated, laughing under my breath. That's rich. You're not restructuring. You're eliminating anything that threatens your control, including me. The silver-haired board member leaned forward. And what exactly are these upcoming structural changes? A new voice cut in before Veronica could answer. Jasper. He stepped into the room, a folder in his hand, his expression grim. Maybe I can answer that, he said, placing another document on the table. Because I just found something interesting, too. He looked at me. It's worse than we thought. I picked up the document and scanned the words. My stomach dropped. Harrison and Mills. A merger proposal. If this deal went through, it wouldn't just push me out. It would dissolve the entire sales department. Everything I had built. Everything I had fought for. Gone. I lifted my gaze to Veronica. You weren't just trying to get rid of me, I said slowly. You were planning to get the company from the inside out. Her smile was cold. It's called strategy, dear. I gripped the papers in my hands. Oh, I said, my voice steady now, my anger razor-sharp. Then let's play. The moment I dropped the final piece of evidence onto the boardroom table, I knew I had backed them into a corner. Veronica sat rigidly at the head of the table, her fingers interlaced, her expression carefully neutral. Olivia, on the other hand, looked pale, her confidence unraveling as the weight of her failures became undeniable. I turned to the board. If Olivia stays in charge of the Lancaster account, we will lose it. And if we lose it, we lose millions in projected revenue, not to mention our reputation. I crossed my arms. So, I suggest you reconsider who you want managing this department. A few board members murmured in agreement. The tide was shifting. I could feel it. But before anyone could respond, Nolan stood abruptly. That's enough, he said sharply. His gaze flickered to me, but it wasn't the warm, steady look I used to know. It was tight, unreadable. Lena, you're blowing this out of proportion. I scoffed. Am I? You've seen the numbers, Nolan. You've read Mr. Langston's email. This is real. His jaw clenched. I don't need you to tell me how to handle my own family. I flinched, but I didn't let it show. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. I am your family. His silence stretched between us, the air so thick I could barely breathe. Then he turned to his mother. I need some air. Nolan, Veronica started, but he didn't wait for her. He stormed out of the boardroom, shoving the door open so forcefully that it slammed against the wall. I exhaled slowly, forcing myself to stay calm, but my hands were shaking. Veronica stood, smoothing the front of her dress, her icy composure intact. "Well," she said, addressing the room, "it appears my son needs some time to cool down. Why don't we reconvene at a later time?" I wanted to scream. She was already brushing this under the rug. One by one, the board members stood, avoiding my gaze as they left the room. Olivia lingered, avoiding my eyes, before following her mother out. Jasper came up beside me. "You okay?" I nodded stiffly, but I wasn't okay. I had pushed Nolan too hard. He had walked away.
And the worst part?
I had no idea if he would come back. Hashtag, hashtag, hashtag. 3 hours later, I was still in my office, staring blankly at my laptop when Jasper burst through the door. His face was pale. My stomach dropped. "Jasper?" He swallowed hard. "It's Nolan. He's been in an accident." The world tilted. "What?" "It was bad," Jasper said, his voice tight. "They're taking him into surgery now." I didn't even remember grabbing my coat, my purse, didn't remember the elevator ride down to the lobby or the drive to the hospital. All I knew was that my heart was slamming against my ribs, a horrible, gnawing panic crawling through my skin. I burst into the hospital lobby, searching for anyone who could tell me what was happening. Then I saw her, Veronica, standing by the ICU doors, Olivia at her side. I rushed toward them. "Where is he?" "Is he?" Veronica held up a hand, stopping me in my tracks. "Family only," she said coolly. The words didn't register. "What?" "Only immediate family is allowed in the ICU," she repeated, her tone measured, detached. "And given the circumstances, I don't think you qualify anymore." A sharp, cold pain shot through my chest. "You can't be serious." "Oh, I'm very serious." She straightened, tilting her chin up. "My son is in critical condition, and I won't have unnecessary distractions upsetting him."
Distraction.
That's what I was to her. I turned to Olivia, searching for some kind of humanity in her face. Instead, she just crossed her arms and gave me a look filled with something I couldn't quite place. Pity?
No.
Something worse. "I mean," she said softly, "it's not surprising, is it? He was so upset after your little ultimatum." My throat tightened. "What are you saying?" She shrugged. "I'm just saying he left the office in a terrible state. Who knows if he was even thinking clearly?" She sighed dramatically. "It's tragic, really." The implication hit me like a physical blow. They were blaming me for this. Tears burned the edges of my vision, but I refused to let them fall.
Not in front of them.
I took a slow step back, then another. In a matter of hours, I had lost everything. My husband.
My job.
My place in the family I had spent years trying to be part of. I should have felt devastated. I should have broken down, begged, screamed, something. But as I turned and walked out of the hospital, I realized something else entirely. I had nothing left to lose. And that made me dangerous. The official announcement came the next morning. I was still at the office, running on zero sleep, surrounded by stacks of documents proving Olivia's incompetence, when the email landed in my inbox. Subject: Interim Leadership Announcement. Asterisk, in light of recent events, we are pleased to announce that Olivia Kensington will be assuming executive control of the sales department while Nolan recovers. We trust her leadership will guide the company forward during this difficult time. Asterisk. There was no mention of me. No acknowledgement of the work I had done, the deals I had secured, or the clients I had saved. It was as if I had already been erased. I sat back in my chair, gripping the arms tightly as anger flooded my veins. They weren't just replacing me. They were rewriting history. I grabbed my coat and car keys, heading straight to the hospital. I had spent the last 6 years fighting for my place in this family. If they thought I was going to just disappear, they were wrong. When I arrived at the ICU doors, a nurse was standing at the station, flipping through a chart. "I'm here to see Nolan Kensington," I said firmly. She glanced up, her expression tight. I'm sorry, but only immediate family is allowed. I'm his wife. I cut in, my voice sharp. The nurse hesitated, but before she could say anything else, a familiar voice rang out behind me. Lena, this is getting embarrassing. I turned to see Veronica approaching, her every step measured, composed, as if she hadn't spent the last day orchestrating my downfall. Go home, she said smoothly. There's nothing for you here. I clenched my fists. I want to see my husband. She let out a sigh, as if she were dealing with an unruly child. And I already told you, family only. I am family. Her lips curled into something resembling pity. Not for much longer. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. Jasper. I turned away from Veronica, pressing the phone to my ear. What is it? His voice was low, urgent. You need to see this. Hashtag. Jasper was waiting in my office, his face grim as he placed a tablet in front of me. It's security footage from the night of the accident, he said. Watch. I hit play. The video showed the parking garage of our office. Nolan's car pulling out. A few seconds later, another set of headlights appeared. A second car followed him. I felt my pulse slow, a sickening realization settling over me like ice. It was Olivia's car. She had followed him. I glanced up at Jasper. How did you get this? I pulled it from the backups, he said. Someone tried to erase the footage overnight, but I caught it before it was completely wiped. I swallowed hard, the weight of it hitting me all at once. Nolan hadn't just been driving erratically out of frustration. Olivia had been there. Maybe she had tried to talk to him. Maybe she had distracted him. Maybe it was just an accident, or maybe it wasn't. I didn't waste time. I stormed out of my office, heading straight for Veronica's. She was sitting at her desk, reviewing paperwork, not a single crack in her flawless composure, when I slammed the door behind me. I know, I said. She didn't even look up. Know what, dear? I stepped forward, placing the tablet on her desk and hitting play. Her eyes flicked to the screen, watching as Olivia's car followed Nolan out of the parking garage. A long silence stretched between us. Then, she reached out and paused the video. She sighed, setting her pen down neatly beside her paperwork. This is a waste of time, Lena. I stared at her, stunned by her complete lack of reaction. You're not even going to deny it? Veronica folded her hands. Accidents happen. I felt my breath hitch. You don't even care, do you? That your son almost died. Care? She repeated, arching an eyebrow. Of course I care. That's why I'm ensuring the company stays in capable hands while he recovers. I shook my head in disbelief. The police. The police, she cut in smoothly, have already ruled it an accident. No mechanical failures, no foul play. Nothing to investigate. I opened my mouth, but the realization settled over me before I could even say the words. She had already taken care of it.
Of course she had.
I took a slow step back, suddenly feeling suffocated. I had spent years fighting to prove myself to this family. And in return, they had destroyed everything. Veronica said, reaching for a folder. Before you go. She slid a stack of papers across the desk toward me. I didn't even have to look to know what they were. Divorce papers. My chest tightened. You didn't waste any time, did you? I asked bitterly. Veronica smiled. Why would I? It's been a long time coming. I forced myself to stay calm, to breathe. I picked up the papers, flipping through the neatly typed legal jargon. At the bottom, there it was. Filed by Veronica Kensington. On Nolan's behalf. She had complete control. Over him. Over everything. I let out a hollow laugh. Does he even know? Veronica didn't answer. I looked down at the papers one last time, then slowly set them back on her desk. I hope you're ready, I said quietly. For what? I met her gaze. For what happens when he wakes up. Her smile didn't falter. Oh, darling, she said. You assume he'll wake up on your side. I turned and walked out. Not because I was giving up. Because I had just realized something far more powerful than anger. I didn't need to win. I just needed to make sure Veronica lost. I sat in my office, staring at the divorce papers without really seeing them. The The weight of everything pressed down on me. The betrayal, the lies, the accident that might not have been an accident at all. But through all the noise in my head, something kept nagging at me. I picked up the papers again, flipping through them absently until my fingers landed on a familiar document buried beneath them. Nolan's will. Veronica must have sent it as a reminder of how little power I had left. I skimmed through it, my mind barely registering the legal jargon, until I saw it. A clause. A very specific clause. Asterisk, only direct blood relatives may inherit or hold executive authority within Kensington Enterprises. Asterisk. I frowned. I had seen this before. It was one of the ways Veronica had ensured I could never have a controlling stake in the company. But something about it felt off. My eyes darted across Nolan's medical records, another document I had pulled earlier but hadn't given much thought to. Then I saw it. His blood type. O negative. My breath caught in my throat. I grabbed my phone and quickly searched basic blood inheritance rules. Type O parents can only have type O children. I flipped through the company's HR files, scanning until I found Olivia's records. Type A. That was impossible. Unless she wasn't his sister. My entire body went cold. Jasper, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked up from his laptop, raising an eyebrow. What? I swallowed hard. I need you to find something for me. Bianca's original birth records. Not the ones on file here, the original ones. Jasper frowned. Why? I hesitated for only a second before sliding the will across the desk. He skimmed the highlighted section, then looked up. Blood relatives only. I nodded. Then I pointed at Nolan's blood type. Jasper's eyes widened. Oh, shit. She can't be his sister, I said, my voice growing stronger. Which means she can't legally inherit or hold any authority in the company. Jasper didn't ask any more questions. He was already typing, his fingers flying across the keyboard. It took him less than 10 minutes. Got it, he said, turning the screen toward me. A scanned birth certificate. Bianca Kensington wasn't Bianca Kensington. She had been born Bianca Hayes. Her birth parents weren't listed as Nolan's father or Veronica. I felt my pulse thunder in my ears. She's not even an Everhart, I whispered. Jasper leaned back in his chair, whistling. That explains a lot. I could barely think. All these years, Veronica had positioned Olivia as the golden child, the rightful heir. She had bent over backward to make sure Olivia had a place at the top of the company. Not because she was qualified, but because she wasn't really a Kensington at all. I exhaled sharply. This is why Veronica always favored her. Why she pushed so hard to get her into the company. Jasper nodded. And why she's been scrambling to protect her. If this gets out, Olivia loses everything. Not just the company. Her entire identity. I leaned forward, staring at the documents spread out before me. Veronica had spent years controlling every move I made, stripping me of my power, my place, my security. Now, I held the one thing that could destroy her entire empire in a single move. I wasn't just going to fight back. I was going to burn it all down. I didn't knock. I didn't wait. I stormed into the boardroom like I owned it because after today, I just might. Veronica sat at the head of the table, speaking in her usual cool, measured tone, while Olivia sat beside her, feigning confidence. The board members looked bored, disinterested, as if this was just another routine meeting. That was about to change. Apologies for the interruption, I said, dropping a thick folder onto the table with a loud thud. But I think you all need to see this. Veronica's gaze flickered to me, her irritation barely concealed. Lena, this is a private. Oh, I know, I said smoothly. You've been having a lot of those lately. Meetings where you conveniently forget to include me. I looked around the table. But considering the future of this company is at stake, I figured you wouldn't mind if I dropped in. The board members exchanged glances. Veronica folded her hands neatly on the table. Whatever scheme you're trying to pull, it won't work. I smiled. Oh, I think it will. I turned to the chairman, the most senior board member in the room. Mr. Caldwell, could you remind me of the company's inheritance clause? his brow furrowed, confused. Only direct blood relatives may inherit or hold executive authority within Kensington Enterprises. Right, I said, flipping open the folder and pulling out the first document. Which brings me to a very interesting discovery I made last night. I slid the paper across the table. This is Nolan's medical record. His blood type is O negative. A few board members murmured, unsure why that was relevant. I didn't give them time to ask. I pulled out another document. And this is Olivia's employee record. Her blood type is A. I paused for effect. Which, for those of you who aren't familiar with basic genetics, is impossible. A stunned silence fell over the room. I placed the final piece of evidence on the table, the original birth certificate Jasper had found. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, my voice razor-sharp. Meet Bianca Hayes. Olivia went pale. Veronica didn't move, didn't speak. For the first time since I had known her, she looked trapped. One of the board members, a woman in her 60s, gasped. Are you saying? I'm saying Olivia Kensington isn't a Kensington at all, I said coldly. Which means she has no right to run this company. No authority. No claim. Nothing. All hell broke loose. Board members shouted over each other, demanding answers. Veronica, ever composed, simply straightened her shoulders and said, "This changes nothing." But before she could continue, the doors swung open again. Nolan. He stood in the doorway, pale, unsteady on his feet, but very much awake. His eyes swept the room, then landed on the birth certificate in front of him. I saw it, the second the realization hit. Nolan, Veronica said smoothly, already shifting tactics. You shouldn't be here, sweetheart. You need to rest. Is it true? His voice was hoarse. Nolan.
Is it true? He snapped.
A tense silence stretched between them. Then Veronica sighed. Yes. Olivia made a choked sound. Mother? Veronica turned to her sharply. Enough, Olivia. But Olivia wasn't listening anymore. She was staring at the papers in front of her, her hands trembling. My whole life, she whispered. Everything was a lie? None of that matters now, Veronica said, regaining control. She turned back to Nolan. We can handle this internally. You're back, and you'll support the family, as you always have. I took a step forward. So, what's it going to be, Nolan?
He looked at me.
Then at his mother. A lifetime of loyalty on one side, the truth on the other. And then he made his choice. He reached for the documents, his jaw tight.
This ends now, he said.
He turned to the board. Effective immediately, Veronica Kensington is to be removed from all decision-making within this company. The board murmured in agreement. Nolan looked at Olivia. And you. She swallowed hard. Nolan, please. You need to step down. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't fight. She simply nodded, defeated. Veronica, however, wasn't finished. You ungrateful boy, she hissed, her mask finally slipping. Everything I did was for you. No, Nolan said. Everything you did was for yourself. Security arrived within minutes. Veronica Kensington was escorted out of the boardroom she had ruled for decades. And just like that, the Kensington Empire was no longer under her control. I stood in the middle of the chaos, my heart pounding. I had won. But more importantly, Veronica had lost. 6 months later, I stood in my new office, the corner one with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. My name was etched onto the glass door, not as someone's wife, not as a placeholder, but as the rightful leader of Kensington Enterprises. It hadn't been easy. Undoing years of Veronica's control had been a battle every step of the way, but I had fought for this. And I had won. There was a knock at the door. I looked up to see Olivia, no longer the smug, entitled woman who had once tried to take everything from me. I have the updated Lancaster projections, she said, setting the files on my desk. Her voice was quieter now, more measured. I nodded, flipping through them. Good work. She hesitated, shifting on her feet. I know it doesn't mean much, but I appreciate the second chance. I met her gaze. Earn it. She nodded, understanding. Some wounds took time to heal. As she left, another presence filled the doorway. Nolan. He leaned against the frame, still moving slower than before, but recovering. Finally free from his mother's influence. "Ready for lunch?" he asked. "Almost," I said, gathering my things. As we stepped out into the crisp spring air, the park where he had first proposed was in full bloom. Life moving forward, just as we had. He reached for my hand, lacing his fingers through mine. "You did it," he said softly. "We did it," I corrected. He smiled, then tilted his head. "What?" I exhaled, pulling a small sonogram photo from my purse and placing it in his palm. He stared at it, then at me, his breath hitching. "Is this?" I nodded. "Due in winter." His grip tightened around my hand. "Lena, the Kensington legacy continues," I murmured. "But this time, it's on our terms." His expression was a mix of shock and awe, of something finally right in a world that had been so wrong for so long. I knew better than to think Veronica was truly gone. She would find a way to fight back, she always did. But that didn't scare me anymore, because I had already rewritten my story. And this time, I was the one holding the pen.